In the bustling heart of Lagos, where danfos screech and traders cry out in endless chorus, two lives collide, one of dust, one of diamonds. Obinna, a homeless drummer with nothing but rusty tins, plays rhythms of hope on streets that mock him. Chief Adewale, a billionaire whose empire touches the sky, carries a past buried beneath gold. What happens when the beat of survival meets the roar of wealth? This is not just the story of a beggar and a king, but of how dignity can rise from the pavement and shake the thrones of power. This is the folktale of Lagos, the drum and the lion. In the restless heartbeat of Lagos, where danfos screeched and traders' voices clashed like waves, sat a man drumming. His name was Obinna. Homeless, with nothing but torn clothes and weary sandals, he leaned over two rusty tins, beating them as if they were sacred talking drums. Each rhythm told a story of hunger, yes, but also of hope. Children gathered, their laughter ringing like bells of joy. Even tired traders, sweating under the weight of baskets, found their feet tapping to his tune. Obinna's ribs spoke of hunger, yet his eyes blazed with stubborn fire. That evening, as the sun painted the sky orange, a sleek black SUV rolled to a halt. Its tinted windows reflected the crowd like mirrors of destiny. Market voices fell silent. Everyone knew such cars belonged not to ordinary men. Obinna's hands did not falter. His drums sang louder. Destiny was coming to listen. The SUV door swung open, and the crowd held its breath. Out stepped Chief Adewale, a man whose very presence bent the air. Tall and broad-shouldered, his bald head gleamed under the fading sun. His navy blue agbada, embroidered with golden patterns, shimmered like a river of wealth, and his wristwatch flashed brighter than the market lamps. Whispers rippled. The billionaire. Some bowed their heads, others craned their necks to see. Traders froze, clutching their wares, while children hushed. Yet Adewale's sharp eyes did not scan the market stalls or the people's reverence. They fixed on one man, the street drummer who dared to play joy into emptiness. "Why do you drum with laughter?" he asked, his voice calm but commanding. "When your pockets carry nothing." Obinna raised his head. Sweat lined his brow, but his gaze was steady. His words fell like palm wine into silence. "Because music is the wealth no man can steal." The crowd gasped. Adewale stood still, struck by an answer no gold could buy. The marketplace had become a theater. Every eye watched, every breath waited. A billionaire and a beggar, face to face. Adewale's gaze burned with curiosity, yet also doubt. Music cannot feed the belly, Adewale pressed, his deep voice echoing. It cannot build a roof, nor open the doors of power. Why cling to it as though it were riches? Obinna tapped his tins softly, his rhythm steady, as though to remind the earth of its heartbeat. "Because, Chief, hunger may empty the stomach, but despair empties the soul. I guard my soul." A murmur spread. Some laughed at the homeless man's boldness. Others nodded in wonder. Adewale, for the first time in years, felt a stirring in his chest, a memory of nights long ago when he too had sat in darkness, with only songs to comfort him. But pride weighed heavy. He would not reveal weakness before the crowd. Instead, he turned to his driver and said, "Bring him." The crowd gasped louder. Obinna's fate had shifted with a single command. The SUV door swung open once more, but this time it was for Obinna. Gasps rippled as the homeless drummer, with hesitant steps, climbed into a billionaire's car. Some laughed, others shook their heads. "What business does dust have with gold?" they muttered. The ride was silent, except for the low hum of the engine and Obinna's quiet heartbeat. His tins rested on his lap, as though he feared they might vanish. Adewale sat beside him, eyes unreadable, lost in thoughts of why he felt compelled to test this man. Minutes later, the SUV pulled through iron gates taller than palm trees. Obinna's eyes widened. Before him stretched a mansion that seemed to scrape the heavens. Marble floors, golden lights, fountains singing like streams. For a man who had slept on pavements, it was another world. Yet, as servants bowed and doors opened, Obinna felt not awe, but a tightening in his chest. He was a stranger in the house of giants. The mansion glittered like a palace, but not every heart within carried gold. As Obinna entered, servants whispered and chuckled behind silken curtains. "A beggar here," one scoffed. "Look at his rags, he will stain the marble." Another muttered, Our master must be joking. Obinna heard it all. His cheeks burned, but he clutched his tins and walked on, each step heavy yet steady. Chief Adewale watched, saying nothing. He wanted to see how this man would carry himself among scorn. At the dining hall, chandeliers glowed like suns. Silver platters lined the table, rich aromas filling the air. Obinna sat quietly, his back straight, though hunger roared within him. He would not eat like a thief. He would wait. The servants mocked again, their laughter soft but sharp. Yet Obinna's eyes remained calm. He whispered to himself, "The drum never argues with the hand that strikes it. It simply answers with rhythm." Adewale, hidden in thought, felt a rare respect blooming. Dinner was served. Silver platters of steaming jollof rice, grilled fish, and spiced meats filled the table, their aromas intoxicating. The servants, still smirking, placed before Obinna a polished plate, empty. "Perhaps he is used to eating air," one whispered cruelly. Laughter rippled softly. Obinna looked down at the plate, then back at his drums resting by his feet. His stomach groaned, but he did not reach for food unoffered. Instead, he tapped his tins softly under the table, weaving a rhythm only he could hear. It calmed him. Chief Adewale watched closely. A lesser man might have cursed, begged, or stormed out. Yet Obinna sat tall, waiting with patience that seemed to shame even the golden lights above. Finally, Adewale lifted his hand. "Serve him." His voice carried weight, silencing the room. Dishes were brought, overflowing with food. Obinna bowed his head once, then ate, not as a beggar, but as a man who understood dignity. That night, Obinna was shown to a guest room grander than anything he had ever dreamed. The bed stretched wide as a river, its sheets soft as clouds. Curtains of silk swayed in the evening breeze. Yet he did not lie down. Instead, he placed his tins gently by the bed and sat on the floor, back straight, legs folded. The marble beneath him was cold, but familiar. A servant peeked in, eager to mock. "The beggar cannot sleep on gold," he whispered. But Adewale, unseen in the hallway, listened. He saw Obinna, untouched by temptation, resting as he always had, with dignity. When dawn painted the sky, Obinna finally lay his head on the bed, not in desperation, but in gratitude. "Let the body learn comfort slowly," he murmured, "so the spirit does not forget humility." Adewale turned away, his heart stirred once more. At dawn, Adewale invited Obinna into his vast garden. Roses, hibiscus, and jacarandas painted the air with fragrance. Marble fountains gushed, birds sang in gilded cages. "Walk with me," Adewale said. They strolled past trimmed hedges and golden statues. Finally, he asked, "What do you think of my garden?" Obinna looked around slowly, then answered, "It is beautiful, yes, but a caged bird does not sing for joy, only because it cannot fly. Wealth that locks beauty in cages is wealth that does not breathe." Adewale's brow furrowed. His servants stiffened, expecting rebuke. But the billionaire said nothing, only walked on. For in Obinna's words, he heard a truth he had long silenced within himself. Obinna's bare feet pressed into the grass, as though he belonged more to the earth than the mansion ever could. Not all in the mansion wished Obinna well. One servant, jealous of the attention he received, decided to test him. He spilled palm wine across the polished floor and placed the jug near Obinna's door. When the mess was discovered, he pointed and shouted, "The beggar did this." Whispers spread. Some nodded, ready to see Obinna cast out. But when Adewale arrived, he found Obinna kneeling, wiping the spill with his torn shirt. He did not defend himself, did not accuse. He simply said, "The floor deserves to shine, no matter who dulled it." The guilty servant turned pale. Adewale's eyes narrowed, for he understood the trick. But Obinna's humility silenced his anger. He thought, "This man protects dignity more than he protects pride." That night, Obinna sat by the window of his room, looking out at the glowing city beyond the mansion gates. His tins rested by his side, silent. He thought of the streets, the laughter of children, the taste of nothing on his tongue. "Why me?" he whispered to the night sky. "Why has the river of fate carried me here?" He tapped the tins once, twice, softly, like a heartbeat. The sound echoed in the stillness. To him, it was prayer. In another wing of the mansion, Adewale sat alone, staring at a portrait of his younger self. A barefoot boy, carrying water on his head. He whispered, "Why him? Why does he remind me of what I buried long ago?" Two men, worlds apart, sat awake under the same roof, each stirred by the other. Destiny's drumbeat had only just begun. The next morning, Obinna followed Adewale into the grand hall. His old sandals slapped against the marble, their soles barely holding. The servants noticed and burst into muffled laughter. "Look at the beggar's shoes," one sneered. Another whispered loudly, "They belong in the dustbin, not in a palace." Obinna bent, adjusted the straps, and smiled faintly. "Shoes are only leather," he said softly, "but feet carry the journey. Better worn feet than an empty path." The servants fell silent, shamed by his calm. Chief Adewale's gaze lingered on Obinna's tattered sandals. For the first time, he remembered his own childhood, when he too walked barefoot to fetch water. Pride made him look away, but inside, a hidden respect grew. That evening, Adewale hosted a banquet for wealthy guests. Businessmen, politicians, and dignitaries filled the hall. Obinna sat quietly at the far end, his tins beside him, his presence sparking curious glances. One guest sneered, "Chief, why allow a street beggar at your table? He will stain the air with poverty." Laughter erupted. Another added, "Perhaps he is your entertainment." Obinna remained silent, though his heart burned. Finally, one arrogant man tossed a bone toward him, as if to a dog. Gasps filled the room. Obinna picked it up, examined it, then gently placed it back on the golden plate. "Even a bone carries respect," he said softly. "It once held life. To throw it is to mock not me, but creation itself." The hall fell into stunned silence. Adewale's guests looked away, their laughter dying like a fire starved of air. Adewale, for the first time in years, smiled faintly. Late that night, as the guests departed, two of Adewale's advisors approached him. "Chief," they warned, "this beggar is a danger. He will embarrass you. Already your friends whisper, your judgment weakens." Adewale frowned but said nothing. He turned instead to Obinna, who sat outside under the moon, softly drumming. "Do you know what they say of you?" Adewale asked. Obinna nodded, still drumming. "The drum cannot stop the mouth of the one who mocks, but it can remind the heart of the one who listens." Adewale studied him carefully. His advisor's words weighed heavy, but Obinna's music seemed to carry something more, something he could not name. For the first time, he wondered, perhaps this man is not here for my test, but for my salvation. One stormy night, thunder shook the mansion. A servant, eager to mock Obinna, handed him an old oil lamp. "Beggar, go light the hall. Let us see if you know how to serve." Obinna took the lamp. The wind howled, lightning cracked. But as he climbed the stairs, the lamp slipped from his hands and shattered on the marble floor. Laughter erupted. "Even a lamp he cannot carry," someone jeered. Obinna bent, gathered the shards, and whispered, "A lamp breaks, but light is eternal. Only darkness fears the flame." He placed the broken pieces gently aside, then struck his tins. Their rhythm echoed through the hall, steady as thunder, calming the storm of laughter. Adewale stood silently, his eyes burning with something new, admiration. The storm raged, lightning flashing like ancestral fire. The mansion trembled, power flickered, and finally, darkness swallowed the hall. Servants panicked, guests cried out. But Obinna lifted his tins and began to play. His rhythm was deep, steady, like the heartbeat of the earth. Boom, boom, tat. The thunder seemed to answer him. The storm outside became part of his song. Slowly, fear melted. Servants quieted. Even Adewale stood transfixed, his chest rising with each beat. The music awakened memories buried under years of wealth. Nights as a boy, sitting by a small fire, singing to the stars. When the storm passed, silence fell. All eyes turned to Obinna, who sat still, his drums resting on his knees. Adewale whispered, almost to himself, "This man does not play drums. He plays destiny." And destiny had only just begun its dance. Dawn broke over the mansion, soft light dripping through tall windows. The storm was gone, but whispers of the night lingered. Servants moved quietly, their faces pale with the memory of fear. Yet one name was on every lip, Obinna. They had laughed at him, mocked his rags. Yet when darkness fell, it was his drums that carried courage into their trembling hearts. Now, as he sat in the courtyard, his tins beside him, they watched with new eyes. Chief Adewale appeared, his navy blue agbada sweeping the floor. He looked at Obinna long and hard. The man before him was no longer just a beggar. He was a reminder, a mirror of strength carved not by gold, but by fire. "Come," Adewale said quietly. "Walk with me." And so, side by side, the billionaire and the homeless man began a journey neither yet understood. Adewale led Obinna beyond the marble walls into the quieter parts of the estate. Tall palm trees lined the path, their shadows long under the morning sun. Birds darted overhead, free and restless. "Do you know where I came from?" Adewale asked suddenly. Obinna shook his head. The billionaire's voice softened. "I was not born in silk. I was a barefoot boy in Ibadan, carrying water before sunrise, pounding yam before school. My father had nothing, but he gave me discipline." Obinna listened, his eyes gentle. "Then you understand hunger, Chief. You understand dust on the feet." Adewale stopped walking. His chest tightened with memories he had buried beneath wealth. He looked at Obinna, and for the first time, saw not a beggar, but a reflection of his younger self. He whispered, almost ashamed, "I had forgotten." That evening, Adewale brought Obinna into his study. On the wall hung a portrait, an old painting of a boy with bare feet, carrying a clay pot of water on his head. His eyes were sharp, his back straight, though poverty clothed him. Obinna stepped closer, his voice soft. "This boy, he is you." Adewale nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, I built empires to bury him. I wore gold so no one would see the dust. Yet you have made me remember." Obinna turned, placing his hand gently on his tins. "Chief, forgetting our roots is like cutting the tree from its soil. It may stand tall for a time, but one storm will bring it down." For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the soft ticking of a golden clock. Adewale closed his eyes, hearing Obinna's words echo like a drumbeat in his soul. Days passed, and Adewale hosted another dinner. This time, Obinna was seated not at the far end, but closer to the center. Wealthy guests eyed him with suspicion, but none dared mock openly. As food was served, Adewale raised his glass. "Let us eat, but also let us remember. Not every hunger is in the stomach. Some hungers live in the soul." Obinna looked down at his plate, then at his tins resting beside him. He thought of the streets, of children who had no plates to look down upon. Slowly, he said, "A man may fill his belly with rice, but if he forgets the hungry child outside his gate, his feast turns to ashes." The guests fell silent, uncomfortable, yet Adewale's eyes shone. "Wisdom," he said firmly, "does not always wear silk." Obinna bowed his head, his humility shining brighter than gold. After the feast, Adewale called Obinna to his private chamber. The room glowed with lamplight, its shelves lined with books and maps of empires. "Obinna," Adewale said, "I have tested you with hunger, with scorn, with false blame. Yet you have answered with patience, humility, and wisdom. Tell me, what is it you truly desire?" Obinna looked at his tins, then at the man before him. His voice was steady. "I desire nothing for myself, Chief, but I desire everything for those who sleep tonight in the streets, as I once did. If my hands can open doors for them, then let them be used." Adewale stared, silent. In his heart, a seed of trust had been planted. He thought, "This man does not seek my gold. He seeks a greater treasure." And that realization shook him more than all the storms of the past. That night, Chief Adewale could not sleep. He walked through his mansion, past halls of gold and marble, until he reached the balcony. The city lights flickered like restless spirits. Yet his mind was far away, back in a small village where stars were brighter and nights were colder. He remembered his mother's voice. "Adewale, never forget the dust from which you were formed." He had forgotten. Wealth had buried those words beneath noise and pride. Below the balcony, he saw Obinna sitting with his tins, drumming softly to the night. The rhythm was simple, steady, like the heartbeat of the earth. It pulled him into memory, bare feet on red clay, a boy chasing goats, a father's stern hand. For the first time in many years, Chief Adewale felt a sting in his eyes. He whispered to the night, "Am I the one being tested?" In dreams that night, Adewale was no longer a billionaire. He was a barefoot boy again, running through Ibadan's dusty roads. He saw himself sitting by a fire, striking a carved wooden drum. The sound echoed through the night, calling his neighbors to gather, to laugh, to share stories. His late father appeared in the dream, his eyes stern but kind. "Adewale," he said, "wealth is not measured by gold. It is measured by the voices that rise because of your song." The boy in the dream drummed faster, and the rhythm grew louder, until it blended with Obinna's tins in the waking world. Adewale stirred in his sleep, his chest heaving. The dream clung to him like a shadow refusing to leave. When morning came, he rose quietly, seeking Obinna with a hunger not of the stomach, but of the soul. Morning sun lit the mansion gardens. Adewale called Obinna to sit with him beneath a jacaranda tree. The billionaire's eyes were heavy, his voice low. "Obinna, last night I dreamed of my father. He told me that wealth is measured not by gold, but by voices lifted because of one's song. I fear I have lost my way." Obinna's eyes softened. He placed his hand on his tins and said, "Chief, the river forgets no drop, even if it has been carried far. You have not lost your way. You have only taken a longer path back home." The jacaranda blossoms fell around them like silent applause. Adewale bowed his head, the weight of years pressing on him. For the first time, he spoke not as a billionaire, but as a man seeking truth. Not everyone welcomed this bond. That evening, Adewale gathered his business council, wealthy men in fine suits, women in glittering wrappers. They whispered in corners, their voices sharp with discontent. "This beggar is poisoning your mind," one accused. "He is no advisor, chief. He is a danger." Another added coldly, "The people will laugh. A billionaire seeking wisdom from rags? You risk your empire." Adewale listened, but his heart was unsettled. He turned his gaze to Obinna, who stood silently at the edge of the hall. His tins hung at his side, but his eyes were steady, unwavering. "Perhaps," Adewale said finally, his voice slow, "wealth has made us blind to the wisdom in rags. Perhaps this man sees what our gold cannot." Gasps filled the hall. Lines were being drawn, and the storm of opposition was only beginning. That night, after the council's accusations, Adewale sat restless. Obinna entered quietly, carrying his tins. He placed them on the floor and began to drum. The rhythm was low, deep, like a lion pacing in the grass. It rose slowly, steady, powerful, until the very air seemed to vibrate. Adewale closed his eyes. "What does this mean?" he asked over the rhythm. Obinna replied, his voice firm, "It is the sound of the lion. The world mocks the lion when it sleeps, but when it rises, all bow. Chief, you are that lion. But a lion without memory of the hunt is only a cat in chains." The rhythm stopped. Silence pressed heavy, and Adewale's heart thundered in his chest. He looked at Obinna with new fire in his eyes. A seed of courage had awoken. Word spread quickly beyond the mansion walls. Adewale's relatives gathered in his sister's compound, their voices sharp as blades. "How can he shame us like this?" one nephew spat. "A billionaire dining with a beggar?" An older uncle shook his head gravely. "The chief forgets that respect holds the throne. If people laugh, our family name burns." That evening, Adewale's sister came to the mansion. Her wrapper was fine, her voice cold. "Brother, you dishonor us. Cast out this man before your empire crumbles." Adewale listened, but said nothing. His eyes wandered to the courtyard, where Obinna sat drumming softly, unaware of the storm his presence had stirred. Inside Adewale's heart, a conflict raged, bloodline against conscience, family against truth. In the council chamber, Adewale's closest business partner, Mr. Folktale, leaned close. His voice was silk over thorns. "Chief, this beggar weakens you. Investors whisper already. They say your judgment is slipping. Trust me, cast him aside before your empire suffers." Adewale frowned, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest, echoing Obinna's rhythms without noticing. Folktale pressed harder. "If you continue this madness, I cannot stand with you. The empire will crumble, and the fault will be yours." That night, Adewale sat alone, troubled. Obinna passed by, his tins slung at his side. He stopped, bowed slightly, and said, "Chief, beware of honey that drips too easily. It often hides the sting of bees." Adewale looked at him sharply. How could this man see through walls? Days later, Adewale attended a high-profile meeting with foreign investors. The conference hall was filled with flashing cameras, reporters, and polished speeches. But whispers of his beggar companion had reached even here. Investors exchanged uneasy glances. One man stood and declared, "Chief Adewale, we respect you, but how can we trust a leader who keeps company with the gutter?" Murmurs rippled through the hall. Adewale's heart pounded. His empire hung on a thread. At that moment, Obinna, who had come quietly to the back of the hall, began drumming lightly. The rhythm was soft, steady, echoing through the tense silence. Some frowned, but others leaned in, strangely calmed. Adewale lifted his hand, silencing the investors. "You question my judgment," he said, "but you do not see the wisdom in the dust. If this man is a beggar, then so once was I." The room erupted in gasps. Humiliated by Adewale's defiance, Falad plotted in secret. Late one night, he met with a group of rivals. Their plan was simple: frame Obinna, break Adewale's trust, and reclaim control. They bribed a servant to hide stolen documents in Obinna's room, contracts worth billions. When the papers were discovered, the council would demand Obinna's head. The next day, shouts rang through the mansion halls. Servants dragged Obinna forward, holding the stolen papers. Gasps echoed. "Thief!" they cried. Obinna stood calm, his tins in his hands. "Paper can be stolen," he said softly, "but truth cannot. If I am guilty, let the earth itself condemn me." Adewale's eyes narrowed. He saw fear in Falad's face. Something in his gut whispered, this was no accident. Adewale called for silence. The grand hall buzzed with anger, suspicion, and fear. He stepped forward, his agbada sweeping across the floor. "Obinna," he said sternly, "they say you are a thief. But my heart says otherwise. Play your drum, and let us see if truth has a sound." Obinna nodded. He placed his tins on the marble floor and began to play. The rhythm rose, deep and haunting, echoing against the walls. The hall stilled. The sound seemed to pierce hearts, stripping away lies. Falad shifted uneasily. Sweat rolled down his brow. Finally, Adewale raised his hand. "Enough." His gaze burned. "A liar fears the sound of truth. And I see fear not in Obinna, but in you, Falad." Gasps filled the hall. The trap had failed. The lion was rising. After Falad's humiliation, the mansion's air grew heavy. Some servants whispered that Adewale had lost his mind. Others claimed Obinna had bewitched him with drums. Even Adewale's sister warned, "Brother, one day this man will betray you. Mark my words." But Adewale said nothing. He only watched Obinna more closely. That night, he entered Obinna's room unannounced. He expected to find gold missing, secrets taken. Instead, he found Obinna sitting cross-legged on the floor, drumming softly, his eyes closed in prayer. The rusty tins echoed a rhythm of gratitude, not greed. Adewale's suspicion crumbled like dry clay. For the first time, he felt ashamed for doubting a man whose only wealth was honesty. Falad, desperate for revenge, sought darker means. He bribed a servant to slip poison into Adewale's evening palm wine. The cup was placed on the table, its liquid gleaming red. But Obinna, entering the hall, paused. He stared at the cup, then at the servant's trembling hands. Something in the air, an intuition sharpened by hardship, told him danger lurked. He stepped forward. "Chief, do not drink." The room froze. Adewale frowned. "Why?" Obinna lifted the cup, sniffed, and poured it onto the marble floor. The liquid hissed against stone, leaving a dark stain. Gasps filled the room. The servant fell to his knees, confessing the plot. Adewale's chest tightened. His life had been spared, not by guards, not by wealth, but by a homeless man's vigilance. When the danger passed, Adewale dismissed the servants and faced Obinna alone. His chest rose with heavy breaths, his eyes burning with unspoken words. "You saved my life," he whispered. "Not once, but twice. When darkness came, it was your drum that lit the night. And now, you guard me against betrayal." Obinna bowed his head. "Chief, I did nothing but listen. Hunger teaches the ear to hear danger where the full stomach hears only silence." Adewale placed his hand firmly on Obinna's shoulder. "You are no longer a beggar in my house. From today, you are my brother." Obinna's eyes widened, glistening with tears. For the first time in years, he felt the warmth of belonging. The mansion no longer seemed a palace of strangers. It began to feel like home. Adewale summoned his council. Falad sat among them, his eyes darting nervously. "Last night," Adewale began, Poison entered my cup, but truth exposed it. He gestured toward Obinna, who stood silently with his tins. This man saved my life again. Gasps spread through the room. All eyes turned to Falad, who sweated under the weight of suspicion. Do you deny it? Adewale thundered. Falad stammered, but silence condemned him more than words. Guards stepped forward, seizing his arms. As Falad was dragged out, Adewale's voice shook the hall. Let all know, wisdom wears no silk, and loyalty wears no crown. This man, mocked as a beggar, has more honor than kings. The council bowed in silence, their arrogance dimmed by Obinna's unshakable dignity. After the council dispersed, Adewale called Obinna to the balcony overlooking the city. The wind was cool, the sky painted with stars. Obinna, he said, I tested you with hunger, with scorn, with betrayal. Yet you never wavered. You guarded not just my house, but my soul. From this day forward, you will not be called beggar nor servant. You will walk beside me as guardian of the people. Obinna's breath caught in his chest. Chief, I am only a man with 2 tins and a song. Adewale's voice grew firm. Then let your song be the crown of trust. For crowns of gold can break, but a crown of truth lasts forever. They stood in silence, the city lights shimmering below, as if Lagos itself bowed to the bond they had forged. Days after Falad's downfall, Adewale summoned his council once more. The air was heavy with expectation. Servants lined the walls, while powerful men and women sat in polished chairs, their jewelry glittering like stars. Adewale rose, his agbada flowing like a river of authority. I have built banks, hospitals, and towers, he began. But what good are empires if the poor sleep in gutters? What is wealth if it does not shelter the weary? Murmurs rippled through the hall. Adewale lifted his hand toward Obinna, who stood humbly at the edge with his tins. This man, whom you mocked, has shown me truth. Today, I declare the birth of the foundation for the forgotten. The council gasped. Some clapped reluctantly, others frowned in disbelief. But Obinna's eyes shone, his spirit steady. The drumbeat of destiny had begun to echo beyond marble walls. The news spread through Lagos like wildfire. Newspapers shouted headlines. Billionaire launches homeless foundation. Radio stations buzzed, streets hummed with gossip. Some praised Adewale's boldness. Others mocked him. He has gone mad. A traitor scoffed. Trusting a beggar with power? But among the poor, hope flickered like dawn. On the same street where Obinna once drummed for coins, children now sang his name. Vendors whispered, perhaps tomorrow will be different. Obinna walked through the market with Adewale beside him. The same crowd that once pitted him now watched with awe. Yet Obinna's step was humble, his tins still in hand. Chief, he said softly, it is not me they cheer, but the hope of food, roof, and dignity. Let us not fail them. Adewale nodded. Then let us build not just walls, but futures. A grand ceremony was held at an open field on Lagos Island. Journalists crowded, cameras flashing, drummers beating, dancers swaying. A great stone lay in the center, draped with white cloth. Chief Adewale stepped forward, his voice steady. Today, we lay the foundation stone of a home for the forgotten. This is not charity, it is justice. He beckoned Obinna forward. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A man once homeless, now standing before governors and dignitaries. Obinna placed his tins beside the stone. His voice carried strong. The drumbeat of hunger has echoed too long in our streets. From today, let it be silenced by the drumbeat of hope. Together, they unveiled the stone. Beneath the sun, history shifted. The crowd roared. Yet not all were pleased. Newspapers with bold ink screamed, Adewale wastes fortune on beggars. Radio hosts laughed. How long before the beggar runs away with the money? At a business dinner, wealthy men whispered, their gold watches gleaming. This foundation will ruin him, one sneered. He listens to drums, not wisdom. Obinna heard the whispers. His heart ached, but he smiled faintly. When the drum speaks truth, even laughter cannot silence it. Adewale placed his hand on Obinna's shoulder. Let them laugh, he said. We will answer with action. Together, they stood firm, the storm of doubt crashing against them like waves, but neither moved. Weeks later, the first building of the foundation rose. Bricks stacked high, roofs laid, workers singing as they built. The once empty field now echoed with hammers and hope. Obinna walked among the workers, his tins strapped to his side. Children followed him, clapping to his rhythms. "Play for us, brother," they cried. He drummed, and their laughter rang like bells of promise. Chief Adewale arrived, surveying the rising walls. Pride shone in his eyes. "This is not my legacy alone," he said, placing his hand on Obinna's shoulder. "It is ours." Obinna's eyes glistened. "Chief, I was once a man without a roof. Now I will help build roofs for many." The drums beat louder, rising above the dust of construction, carrying a song of hope into the city. Obinna returned to the same street where his journey had begun. The cracked pavement still bore the stains of oil. The air still rang with traders' cries, danfos honking in chaos. Children ran forward shouting, "Drummer! Drummer!" But this time, he was not the hungry man begging coins. He came with Adewale at his side, and behind them, workers carrying food, blankets, and supplies. The homeless stirred from corners, eyes wide with disbelief. "Obinna," one whispered. "You? Here." Obinna smiled faintly. "Yes, brothers. I return, not as a beggar, but as a brother with bread in hand." He sat on the pavement, set down his tins, and began to drum. The rhythm was no longer just survival. It was a call of hope. The street that once mocked him now rose in joy. From the back of trucks, food was handed out. Loaves of bread, bags of rice, and bottled water reached the hands of the homeless who had long been forgotten. Women wept, children laughed, men bowed their heads in gratitude. Obinna moved among them, placing loaves gently into frail hands. One old man, trembling, caught his wrist. "You were once here with us. How is it that you now feed us?" Obinna's eyes glistened. "Because one man listened to my drum. And now, my drum is for you." Chief Adewale watched, his chest heavy with pride. For every loaf given, every tear dried, he saw more than charity. He saw justice. And the city, watching from windows and corners, began to whisper, perhaps change was possible after all. As Obinna distributed food, a frail woman in tattered clothes stepped forward. She held a child to her chest, her eyes hollow with hunger. With trembling hands, she reached for bread. Obinna knelt before her, placing not just bread but rice into her arms. "Eat, mother. Your child will not cry from hunger tonight." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You were once like us. Now you give like kings. May the ancestors bless your drum forever." The crowd echoed her blessing, voices rising like a hymn. Adewale's eyes filled with tears he did not wipe away. In that moment, the street that once mocked Obinna became his choir, and the drumbeat of poverty was drowned by the drumbeat of hope. That evening, as the last loaves were given, Obinna sat in the street once more and lifted his tins. He began to drum, not the song of loneliness, but of celebration. Children danced, men clapped, women ululated with joy. Chief Adewale stepped forward, surprising all. He knelt beside Obinna, clapping his hands in rhythm with the drums. Gasps filled the crowd, a billionaire on his knees in the dust. But Adewale only smiled. "Today, there are no beggars, no billionaires. Today, we are one people." The rhythm grew louder, rolling through the market like thunder of joy. And for the first time in memory, the street was not filled with hunger or sorrow, but with unity. The next morning, newspapers carried photographs of the incredible sight. Lagos's wealthiest man kneeling in the dust beside a homeless drummer. The headlines read, "Billionaire and Beggar Unite Streets." The image shook the city. In boardrooms, politicians debated. In markets, traders cheered. In schools, children sang Obinna's name. Radio callers said, "If a billionaire can kneel with the poor, then perhaps we too can change." Obinna, still humble, returned to the mansion with Adewale. "Chief," he said softly, "this is not the end, but the beginning. One drum cannot silence poverty, but many drums together can." Adewale nodded firmly. "Then let us awaken the city." And Lagos, restless and hungry, began to stir toward hope. The foundation's first shelter opened its doors. Dozens of homeless men, women, and children entered, their eyes wide at clean beds, warm food, and walls that promised safety. Obinna walked through the halls, the same man who once slept in gutters now handing blankets to others. Children clung to his legs, laughing. An old woman kissed his hand, whispering, You are the sun the streets gave us." Chief Adewale stood at the entrance, his agbada glowing under the light. "This is only the beginning," he declared. "Every forgotten soul shall find a roof." Obinna set down his tins and drummed once. The rhythm echoed through the halls, no longer sorrowful, but triumphant. And the house of many roofs became a temple of hope. Word spread beyond Lagos. Donations poured in, volunteers gathered, and shelters multiplied. Streets once filled with despair now echoed with laughter. One evening, Obinna stood on a bridge overlooking the lagoon. The city lights shimmered like stars in the water. He tapped his tins softly, and soon children joined, drumming with sticks and buckets, their laughter ringing across the river. Adewale joined him, leaning on the railing. "You see, Obinna, you have started a river. It flows wider every day." Obinna smiled faintly. "A river does not belong to one man, Chief. It belongs to all who drink from it." And the river of gratitude flowed, not in water, but in lives restored. At a grand ceremony, dignitaries gathered to honor Adewale for his foundation. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. But Adewale raised his hand and said, "This honor is not mine. It belongs to the man you once called beggar." He beckoned Obinna to the stage. Gasps erupted. A billionaire stepping aside for a homeless man? Obinna stood, humble yet firm, his tins in his hands. "Once, I drummed to feed my belly," he told the crowd. "Now I drum to feed the soul of this city. The lion may roar, but it is the drum that gathers the people." Thunderous applause shook the hall. In that moment, Lagos crowned not a king of gold, but a king of dignity. The story of Adewale and Obinna traveled beyond Nigeria. Foreign leaders invited them to speak. Universities wrote of their journey, and cameras followed them as symbols of change. But when asked what message they carried, Obinna answered simply, "Do not despise the drum because it is rusty. Its rhythm may yet save a city." In villages across Africa, children drummed on tins, echoing his words. Markets that once chased beggars now welcomed them with bread. And the sound of drums became the anthem of renewal. Chief Adewale, once known only for wealth, became known for compassion. And Obinna, once nameless in the streets, became the voice of a continent forgotten. Years later, at the opening of the largest shelter yet, crowds gathered under the Lagos sun. A great stage stood, with banners reading, "From streets to strength." Obinna sat at the center, his tins polished but unchanged. He drummed one last song. The rhythm was deep, rolling, endless. The sound of pain turned into promise. Children danced, elders sang, and Adewale stood with tears glistening on his cheeks. "This city," he declared, "was saved not by riches, but by rhythm. Let us never forget." Obinna's hand slowed. He lifted his gaze to the sky, whispering, "The drum has spoken." And with that final beat, Lagos roared with unity, a city once divided now bound together by the song of a homeless man and a billionaire. The folktale of the drum and the lion had ended, but its echo would never die. And so the drumbeat of a homeless man shook a city to its core. What began as hunger on a cracked pavement became the rhythm that built shelters, healed the forgotten, and united the mighty with the weak. Obinna, once despised, became the voice of hope. Chief Adewale, once blinded by gold, became the lion who roared with compassion. Together, they proved that true wealth is not in crowns of gold, but in crowns of dignity, worn by those who lift others. The folktale of Lagos ends not in sorrow, but in triumph, a drumbeat that will echo forever in the hearts of those who dare to believe.